What happens when one of America's beloved stars walks into a TV studio expecting warmth, but instead feels something colder? Not shouting, not chaos, something quieter. A subtle tension, a hint of condescension. A host whose confidence starts to sound like arrogance. This isn't a story about raised voices. It's a story about staying calm under pressure, about being dignified, and about the moment even the kindest person decides they've had enough. What happened on that episode of The View? It ended with silence, a broken rhythm, and a walk-off that no one in the room expected. To understand how things got that way, we need to start at the beginning. The studio looked the way it always did during winter. Soft golden lights washed over the set. A arranged holiday backdrop added warmth to the room. Candles glowed behind the glass desk, while festive wreaths framed the windows. Everything about the set was designed to feel welcoming, safe, friendly, especially during the holidays. And the moment Dolly Parton stepped onto the stage, she noticed every detail. She wore a sequined outfit that reflected the studio lights without demanding attention. Her signature blonde hair was styled more relaxed than the glamorous image people usually expected from the stage. She waved to the audience. That familiar smile appeared. Instantly, applause filled the studio. Not everyone reacted the same way. Joy Behar watched quietly. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't frowning either. She was simply observing. Then, as she often did, Whoopi Goldberg leaned forward, welcomed the guest. Please welcome the one and only Dolly Parton. The applause grew louder. Dolly nodded gratefully, placed a hand over her heart for a brief moment before taking her seat. She folded her hands neatly on the table. Between her and Joy sat the mugs from The View, two simple ceramic cups resting on the desk, barriers in a conversation that hadn't even begun yet. "Thank you for having me," Dolly said warmly. "It's good to be." Her voice was gentle, familiar, and instantly comforting. For the few minutes, everything went as expected. Whoopi asked about Dolly's music project. Another host brought up her literacy foundation and the work she's done to help kids learn to read. There was laughter, admiration, and friendly conversation. It was territory. Dolly answered each question easily. Her responses were thoughtful but brief. She didn't promote herself, exaggerate her achievements. Instead, she spoke about creativity, about helping others, and about how she never imagined a life like this while growing up in Tennessee. The audience listened closely. Then something changed. Joy Behar leaned forward. It wasn't aggressive. It wasn't loud. There was a noticeable shift. Her posture straightened slightly, her head tilted as if she had been waiting for the moment. "So Dolly," Joy began casually, "you've been doing this a time." Dolly smiled. "I have." Joy nodded slowly. "Decades, really. Different generations, different audiences." Then she paused. "Yet, somehow you've never really changed your image." The silence that followed felt deliberate. Dolly blinked once, kept smiling. "Well," she replied gently, "I've always believed that when you know who you are, you don't have to chase every trend." A quiet murmur of approval moved through the audience. Joy didn't return the smile. Instead, she continued. "But don't you think there's something a little about that consistency?" she asked. She gestured lightly. The big hair, the sparkles, the exaggerated femininity. Then she added the line that subtly shifted the atmosphere in the room. "Some people might say it feels a bit outdated." The mood in the studio changed instantly. Whoopi glanced sideways. Another host shuffled her notes. For a moment, the warm studio lights didn't feel as warm. Dolly didn't react the way many people might have expected. She didn't tense up. She didn't argue. Her smile remained where it was. Instead, she tilted her head slightly. "Well, Joy," she said softly, "I've always believed femininity isn't something to be ashamed of." She paused before continuing. "It's simply one way of being strong." Joy pressed her lips together. "Sure," she said. "But do you ever worry that younger women might see that and think success means looking away?" She continued pushing the point. "That being taken seriously requires all the glitter?" The words lingered in the air. Not an attack, not a compliment either. Dolly's fingers rested calmly against each other on the table. Her manicured nails tapped lightly against the glass once. Then she responded. "I think young women are smart enough to make their choices," she said. "I trust them more than I trust labels." Applause rippled through the audience. This time it was louder. Joy leaned back in her chair, crossed her arms. "I'm just saying," she added, "you've built a brand. Sometimes brands can distract from real substance." That was the moment something shifted. Not when the words were spoken, when Dolly understood how they were meant. This wasn't curiosity. It wasn't a conversation. It felt like a slow attempt to undermine. For the time since the interview began, Dolly looked directly at Joy, not with anger, with calm clarity. Well, she said gently, I reckon substance speaks for itself. Her voice was still kind, still controlled. The tone in the room had changed. Joy noticed. A faint smile appeared on her face as if she believed she had finally found an opening. Course, Joy replied, I just think it's worth examining. Dolly nodded once. Then examine away, she said softly. I've lived my life in the open. The audience applauded again, louder than before. Joy didn't join them. She simply adjusted her mug, kept her eyes on Dolly as if already preparing her next remark. And Dolly, still smiling, still composed, didn't yet realize. This conversation was far from over. The moment that would leave the entire studio stunned was still coming. The show tried to keep going as if nothing out of the ordinary had happened. Behind the cameras, the producers were quietly helping the conversation get back on track. One of the co-hosts leaned forward with a smile and started talking about Dolly's literacy initiative. Your imagination library has given away than 100 million books, she said, her voice full of admiration. That is not just charity, that is history. For the time since things got tense, Dolly's eyes completely relaxed. This was the topic she felt most comfortable talking about. Not being famous, not getting applause, making a difference. Well, honey, Dolly replied warmly, books helped me long before I became famous. A child with a book is a child with a door. The audience started clapping. A few people even stood up for a second before sitting down as the conversation continued. Whoopi nodded in approval. That is what we love about you, she said. You have always focused on helping people. Joy's expression changed just a little bit. It was subtle. It looked like she was not sure if she deserved the praise. Dolly did not notice or chose to ignore it. For a moment, the studio felt comfortable again. The holiday candles were glowing softly. The cameras were moving smoothly across the panel. The mugs were sitting neatly on the table like props in a conversation. Then Joy slowly pushed her mug forward. The sound of scraping against glass was quiet but sharp. So, Dolly, she said. 2 words. This time her tone was different. Let me ask you something. The co-host beside her blinked as if she was getting ready for what might come. Dolly turned toward Joy with the polite openness she showed everyone. Fans, strangers, even presidents. Her warmth was not an act. It was what she was used to doing. Being kind had become nature to Dolly. Yes, ma'am, Dolly said gently. Joy smiled. It was not a friendly smile. It was a smile that made you feel like you were being judged. Do you ever worry, Joy asked, that your charity work, your kindness, is part of your image? The table fell silent, not because the question was difficult, because it sounded like a trap. Dolly's smile stayed in place for a moment longer than usual. Then she answered. Joy, she said calmly, I do not do what I do to look good. I do it because I remember what it felt like not to have. Joy nodded slowly as if she had expected that answer. Sure, she replied. You cannot deny that doing good things can be helpful for celebrities. It creates a kind of shield. She leaned forward slightly. So when someone criticizes your image, your fans say, oh, she gives away books. The audience started to murmur. You could feel people shifting in their seats as if they wanted to defend Dolly. Dolly's eyes narrowed slightly a little bit. Well, she said calmly, if my work helps people, then I do not mind if it helps my image too. She paused. That is not why I started doing it. Joy leaned in further, clearly energized by the tension. Okay, she said, her voice sharpening. Let us be honest. Your persona. Sweet Dolly, kind Dolly, harmless Dolly. That is a performance, is it not? Whoopi inhaled quietly as if she might step in, but then stopped herself. Sometimes the best thing to do is let someone show you who they really are. Dolly did not flinch. Instead, she gave Joy a thoughtful nod. The kind of nod you give someone when you are choosing not to embarrass them. Honey, Dolly said gently, everything we do in public is a performance. She added softly, yours. A few nervous laughs came from the audience. It was not an insult. It was the truth spoken calmly. Joy's eyes hardened. No, she replied. Mine is conversation. Yours is an act. She continued, pressing harder. You giggle. You flutter your eyelashes. You play the country girl. Somehow people treat you like a saint. Dolly's hands folded a little tighter together. Her bright, polished nails pressed gently against her skin. Her voice remained steady. Joy, she said quietly, I have been called things. She smiled faintly. Doll is not the worst of them. Joy scoffed. You are avoiding the point. I am addressing it, Dolly replied. Just not the way you hoped. The line landed softly, clearly. Around the table, the co-hosts shifted again. One suddenly became very interested in the cue cards in front of her. Another forced a smile that never reached her eyes. Joy continued. She seemed to sense that she was getting closer to the moment she wanted. "Here is the point," she said. "You present yourself as a symbol of empowerment. Your entire image is built around what men wanted women to look like for decades." She gestured slightly. "Big hair, tiny waist, loud sparkle. That is not exactly progressive." There it was, not curiosity, judgment. Dolly blinked slowly. When she spoke again, her voice was still sweet, but it carried a quiet strength now. "Joy," she said calmly, "I did not build myself to please men." She paused. "I built myself to survive the world." The simplicity of the words made them land heavier. Joy opened her mouth, ready to respond before she could. Dolly gently lifted a single finger, polite, measured, firm. "Before you decide what kind of woman I am," Dolly continued calmly, "you might want to ask yourself something." Joy's expression tightened. "What?" Dolly smiled again. This time the smile looked different. It was not warmth, it was composure. Then she asked quietly, "When you look at me, do you see a woman who chose her life, or do you only see what you have been taught to dislike?" The studio went completely quiet. It was not a moment. In some ways it was worse. For Joy, it felt like looking into a mirror. Her lips opened as she tried to brush it off with a laugh. The sound came out weak. "Oh, please," she said. "Dislike? I am just tired of watching grown women dress up and calling it being strong." The audience gasped. The warm holiday set did not feel cheerful anymore. The glowing candles and festive decorations now felt like the backdrop for something heavier. Dolly looked slowly from Joy to the camera and back again. For the first time that morning, it became clear what she was doing. She was not trying to win. She was trying not to get angry. "Joy," she said calmly, her voice still steady, "I have never asked you to like my hair." Joy shrugged. "Well, it is hard not to notice it." Dolly nodded. "And I have never asked you to approve of my choices," she added. Joy leaned back again, that familiar smug look returning. "Then why are you so defensive?" Dolly paused. The silence stretched enough that the entire studio seemed to swallow at once. "Because you are not discussing my choices," Dolly replied quietly. "You are making fun of them." Joy's face turned red. "That is ridiculous." "Is it?" Dolly asked. Her voice remained soft. "Is that just what mean people say when they get called out?" The word mean rolled through the room like thunder. Whoopa's eyes widened. One of the co-hosts froze. Joy's posture stiffened instantly, her tone sharpening faster than she could control. "Do not call me mean," she hissed. "I am asking questions." Dolly did not raise her voice. "That is the thing, Joy," she said gently. "Questions are meant to understand." She paused. "Your questions are meant to hurt." Joy's smile vanished. For a second, something calculating flickered behind her eyes. Push harder. Break her. Get the moment. So she leaned forward again. "Well then," Joy said, her voice edged with challenge, "let's talk about the truth. You are not the saint people think you are." The air in the studio tightened. "You are a businesswoman who sold a fantasy, and you sold it well. People forgot to ask who you really are." Even the audience went silent. It was the kind of silence that happens when something personal has been touched. Dolly did not move. Her hands slowly unfolded. Her shoulders lifted slightly, then settled like someone quietly bracing themselves. Her smile faded into something controlled. When she spoke, her voice was so calm it unsettled the room even more than anger would have. "Joy," she said softly, "you keep talking like you know me." Joy narrowed her eyes. "I know what you show." Dolly nodded once. "And you keep poking?" she continued. "Like you're hoping I will finally snap so you can feel right." Joy scoffed. "That is absurd." Dolly leaned forward slightly. Not dramatically, not aggressively. Enough to close the distance. "No, honey," she said quietly. "That is what this is." The entire studio seemed to hold its breath, because in that moment something had changed. Dolly Parton, the woman known for being sweet, had stopped being sweet. Joy Behar suddenly realized she might have pushed the one person in the room who did not need to shout to dismantle a narrative. Joy opened her mouth to respond. Dolly spoke first. "One more question like that," Dolly said calmly, "and we are going to have a different kind of conversation." Joy blinked. For the time all day, she did not have a response ready. Retreat was not her style. Instead, she smiled. "Thin, sharp, dangerous. Good," Joy replied, "because I am not done." The way she said it made several producers behind the cameras reach for their headsets. Everyone in the room understood now. This was not an interview anymore. It was a fight. The producers probably should have cut to commercial. Everyone could feel it. That tension when a conversation has crossed a line, but no one wants to be the first person to pull the plug. The holiday candle behind the desk continued to flicker, almost absurdly calm compared to the tension in the air. Joy adjusted in her chair, clearly energized. This was her territory. Conflict framed as conversation. Dolly leaned back slightly, folding her hands together again. The softness was gone. What remained was composure. Sharpened into something, Joy cleared her throat. "You know," she began, pretending to reflect, "people love protecting you. That fascinates me." She gestured lightly toward the audience. "You say one thing and everyone applauds like you have solved world peace." A few uncomfortable laughs scattered through the room. Dolly did not react. Joy continued, waving her hand casually. "You talk about kindness and being strong, but you have never really challenged the system. You benefited from it. You played into it." She leaned forward again. "That is not bravery. That is marketing." The word marketing hung in the air like a weight. Whoopi leaned forward quickly. Joy cut her off. "No, let her answer." She smiled again. "I am genuinely curious." The lie in that sentence was obvious to everyone in the room. Everyone except Joy herself. Dolly inhaled slowly through her nose. It was not dramatic, barely noticeable. It was the kind of breath someone takes when they are deciding something important. The kind of breath you take when you are choosing between keeping the peace or finally telling the truth. "I've challenged a lot," Dolly said calmly. "Not in the way you seem to like." Joy lifted an eyebrow, clearly unconvinced. "Oh?" she replied. "How so?" Before answering, Dolly turned her head toward the audience, not to seek approval but to steady the room. "I challenged poverty by not staying poor," she said evenly. "I challenged illiteracy by giving kids books. I challenged unfair treatment by owning my own work," Joy smirked. "And you challenge beauty standards by making them bigger?" The audience gasped. For the time, Dolly's eyes got hard. "Joy," she said, her voice still calm but firm, "you keep confusing what you think with what's true." Joy laughed, a dismissive sound. "That's rich." "No," Dolly replied quietly. "What's rich is sitting behind a desk, judging women's lives from far away." The audience clapped louder, stronger. People in the audience were no longer unsure where they stood. Joy's smile vanished. "You're deflecting," she snapped. "This whole 'I'm a sweet country girl' act, it's manipulative. You use charm so people won't question you." Dolly leaned forward slightly, her elbows brushing the edge of the table. "Let me be clear," she said. "I've never asked anyone not to question me." Joy folded her arms. "Then answer this honestly," she challenged. "If you're so empowered, why follow an image made by men?" That was the line. Not because it was new, because the attack had become relentless. Dolly stared at Joy for long seconds. The studio fell silent. Even the crew behind the cameras seemed to stop moving. When Dolly finally spoke again, her voice was steady, but cold. "I didn't follow anything," she said. "I chose." Joy scoffed. "You call that a choice?" "Yes," Dolly replied, "because a choice doesn't have to look like yours to be real." Joy shook her head. "You're romanticizing fitting in." Dolly gave a smile, but there was no kindness in it this time. "You're using contempt to hurt people." The words landed with precision. Joy opened her mouth to respond. Dolly continued before she could. "You know what bothers me most, Joy?" she said. "It's not that you don't like my hair. It's not that you don't respect my work." Joy rolled her eyes. "It's that you keep talking like there's one way to be a woman." Dolly paused. "Somehow, it just happens to look exactly like you." The studio erupted. Applause burst out before anyone could stop it. A few audience members even stood up. Whoopi exhaled sharply, half concerned about where the moment was heading. Joy's face flushed deep red. "That's absurd," she snapped. "You're projecting." "No," Dolly replied quietly. "I'm observing." Now Joy leaned forward, irritation bleeding through every word. "I'm tired of women like you getting a pass because you smile and give money," she said. "You don't get to avoid criticism just because people find you likable." Dolly nodded slowly. "And you don't get to disguise hate as criticism," she answered calmly, "just because you enjoy tearing people down." Joy's jaw tightened. "That's insulting." Dolly met her stare without blinking. "So is being called a cartoon," she said. "So is being reduced to my looks. So is having my life's work dismissed like it's nothing more than a costume." The energy in the room crackled. This didn't feel like daytime television anymore. It felt like a reckoning. Joy raised her voice again. "You want honesty?" she demanded. "Fine. I think your whole image makes women look weak. I think it tells them they need to be cute to be accepted. She leaned forward. I think it's irresponsible. The silence afterward was brutal. Dolly's expression didn't change. Something behind her eyes shifted. Slowly, deliberately, she straightened the front of her jacket. You don't get to decide what empowers women, Dolly said, each word measured. Not you, not me, no one. Joy laughed bitterly. Spare me the lecture. Dolly's voice dropped lower. This isn't a lecture, she said. It's a boundary. Joy blinked. For the 20 minutes, Dolly continued, you've talked at me, not with me. You've mocked my looks. You've questioned my motives. You've dismissed my choices. Joy started to interrupt. Dolly lifted her hand, not aggressively, just enough to stop the momentum. I stayed, Dolly said quietly, because I believed eventually you'd ask something answering. The sentence stung more than any insult. Joy's composure cracked. You're being dramatic. Dolly nodded once. That's what people say when they don't like being confronted. Suddenly, Joy stood up her chair, scraping loudly against the floor. I don't have to sit and be accused of bullying, she snapped. This is my show. Dolly looked up at her calmly. And that, Dolly replied softly, is the problem. Joy froze. This isn't your show, Dolly continued. It's a platform. And platforms come with responsibility. Joy's voice rose toward a shout. You don't get to lecture me about responsibility. Dolly leaned back slightly as if finally exhaling. You're right, she said. I don't. She paused. I do get to decide how I'm treated. The room fell into an uncomfortable silence. Joy stared at Dolly, completely shocked. Not because Dolly had yelled at her, because she had not. There was no yelling, no drama, just a quiet confidence. I came here to talk to you in faith, Dolly said softly as she stood up from her chair, moving slowly and calmly. I answered your questions. I was okay with your tone. I even gave you the benefit of the doubt. She picked up her mug, looked at it for a second, and put it back on the table carefully. I will not stay where people do not respect me. Joy laughed, crossing her arms. So now you are walking out? Dolly looked at her calmly. I have not decided yet, she said, but you are making it very easy for me to leave. Behind the cameras, the producers were clearly getting nervous. They were pressing their headsets tight against their ears, and their fingers were hovering over the control buttons. The tension in the studio was very obvious. Joy leaned back, looking defiant. If you leave, she said sharply, that is your decision. Dolly smiled. This time her smile was sad. No, she said softly. That is your decision. The audience started cheering even louder than before. Dolly turned to Whoopi. Thank you for inviting me, she said sincerely. I am sorry it ended like this. Whoopi nodded, looking torn. So am I. Joy's voice cut through the moment. We are not done. Dolly stopped moving, turned back to look at Joy directly in the eyes. Yes, Dolly said quietly. We are done. For the first time since the interview started, Joy had nothing to say. The room could feel it. Something else was going to happen, because Dolly Parton still had not walked out. Not yet. When she finally did, everyone sensed it would not be quiet. Joy broke the silence first. You know what? She said quickly. If you cannot handle conversations, maybe you should not come on a live show. Her words sounded rushed and defensive. They did not have the effect she wanted. Dolly stood still for a moment, her posture straight, her face calm. No longer kind. The audience watched in silence. Even the holiday lights behind the desk seemed dimmer now. Joy, Dolly said softly, turning back one time. A tough conversation is not the same as being disrespectful. Joy rolled her eyes. Oh, please, you are just upset because someone finally challenged you. Dolly gave a smile. No, she replied. I am upset because you thought being cruel was being brave. That was the moment everything changed. Joy laughed loudly, throwing her hands up in frustration. Fine, walk out, prove my point. Dolly slowly looked around the table, at Whoopi, at the co-hosts, and at the audience who had been holding their breath for almost the entire conversation. Then she nodded. I think I will. The audience gasped. Dolly reached up, removed her microphone, and carefully put it on the table. Not angrily, not dramatically, gently, like she was putting down something that no longer belonged to her. I came here to talk about Dolly Parton's music, Dolly Parton's books, and hope, she said, her voice steady. Not to be talked down to, not to be mocked, and not to be turned into a spectacle. Then she looked directly at Joy. I wish you well, Dolly added softly. I will not stay where kindness is treated like weakness. Joy opened her mouth. It was already too late. Dolly walked off the set. The audience stood up. Applause thundered through the studio. Loud, sustained, and impossible to ignore. This was not applause. This was the kind that fills a room and refuses to let anyone pretend nothing just happened. Joy sat frozen in her chair. Whoopi slowly cleared her throat. "Well," she said carefully, "we will be back." The truth was obvious. There was no going because in that controlled walk-off, without shouting, without insults, Dolly Parton had made a very strong statement. But everyone watching knew exactly who had crossed the line. Sometimes the loudest statement is not made with voices. Sometimes it is made by knowing when to walk. Dolly Parton did not shout. She did not insult anyone. She simply refused to stay where respect no longer existed. That moment said everything. Now we want to hear from you. If you believe that being dignified is a sign of strength, if you believe that kindness should never be mistaken for weakness, then show your support by liking this video. Subscribe to Pressure Point for unforgettable moments where power shifts live on television. Tell us in the comments, did Dolly Parton do the right thing by walking away? Should Dolly Parton have stayed and fought?